Right, we're up to 80, so I'd suggest it's a minute past 2, so we'll crack on.
Let's go.
Let me say, on behalf of Project Edward and Agilysis, I am delighted to welcome you to this webinar, co-hosted, where we bring together leading voices from policing, policy, data, and local delivery to focus on one simple question: turning national ambition on road safety into sustained action on the ground across England and Wales. Although that's not a question, is it? But how do we do it is the question. The session, we hope, will be firmly rooted in the safe system approach, and will look at what implementation really could look like in practice 6 months on from the publication of the strategy. And you'll remember that Project Edward webinar that we did within 48 hours of the strategy's publication. So our aim in the next couple of hours is to share early insights, test emerging thinking, and highlight the practical levers that can help all of us deliver meaningful and measurable reductions in road harm. So that's kind of where we are. Practicalities are that it's going to go on for about 2 hours. We will take a break in the agenda at 3 o'clock for 10 minutes, allowing you to just cool down, recharge, or refill your water bottle. So that will happen. We're recording it, and I'll put a copy of the recording onto the Project Edward website and YouTube as soon after this as I can make that. Other things just to say, I think we're encouraging use of the chat. Is that correct, Dan? You put me right on that if you prefer Q&A, but
well, I think we would like to see a bit of both, actually, James. So lots of opportunity this afternoon, if you're not too hot, for you to engage in the conversation. So we're going to use both the chat and the Q&A. If from our presenters and panelists that are going to be participating in the programme this afternoon, you've got a specific question that you would like to pose to them, please make sure that you use the Q&A button. So that will allow those of us who are facilitating and chairing panels to make sure that we can easily see those questions, triage them, and try and put them to our panelists. But there's over 100 people on this call, all with a shared interest in how we do maintain momentum since the publication of the road safety strategy. And I'm sure many of you know one another, will have things that you'd want to communicate to one another. So we're really happy for there to be a whole load of conversation going on in the chat. Feel free to reach out to one another and carry on the discussion, just as long as you continue to pay attention to our brilliant presenters and panelists.
Thank you very much, Dan. Would you like to, as well as the practicalities, you've given me the chance just to welcome and set the stall. So if there's anything more you want to add, otherwise we can just quickly run through what it's looking like, what the running order should be, and we'll crack on.
I think it's just great for us to be together, James. I think, as you said, within 48 hours of the publication of the road safety strategy back in January, we did the first one of these in order to bring colleagues together and talk about what the strategy might mean in terms of that ambition. We've then followed that up. This is the second follow-up event that we've done, where we're really trying to sort of drill into that question of how we take the national ambition and move it into local application. And I was just thinking, it's that sort of time of year where many of the summer events have now concluded. Last week was Break's parliamentary reception, which sometimes sort of marks the summer period, but there's still work to be done. The Select Committee has got another oral evidence session next week, and Parliament doesn't rise until next Friday. And what we wanted to do was make sure that as we move into this summer period, there's not just a kind of taking our foot off the pedal, but saying, actually, there's a lot of activity that's already happened this year. How do we keep the pace up, and what could we be doing to ensure that we make the most of the moment that we're in, which I think we all feel is quite a key moment for us as a country. So thank you for those of you, well in excess of 100 people who are on the call and joined us for this session this afternoon.
Fabulous. Well, shall we begin? And I think it's straight back to you, Dan, with the recently launched Wales Road Safety Strategy, which draws out key themes, opportunities and challenges in embedding safe system principles at both national and local level. I'll hand over to you for that, and we will look forward to hearing what you find out. So over to you, Dan. Thank you.
Great, thanks, James. And yeah, so what we wanted to do to kick this off is, obviously, we've had the arrival of the National Road Safety Strategy, and many of us in the sector for a long time were waiting for us to get to that point of having a new national strategy. The last time we had anything called a strategy expired in 2011, so we've had various road safety statements and strategic frameworks, and we're sort of waiting to get to this point. But what has happened in Westminster has been by no means the sum total of what's happened across the country. We saw 5-6 years ago, Scotland launched its strategic framework. We've seen Vision Zero strategies from many subnational partnerships, places like Greater Manchester, Vision Zero Southwest, Warwickshire, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, to name just a few. And pleased to say that what we've also seen emerge quite recently is the strategic plan for road safety that's been developed by Welsh Government and its partners. So where we're going to kick off in today's session is with the opportunity to hear from one of the people behind the plan, in Karina Rutter, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how the plan has developed, and particularly, I think what's going to be key in this, and I want to sort of draw attention to early, is how this moves from strategy into implementation, because there's some great content coming up around what that means in terms of governance structures and the ways in which Wales are looking to work in partnership, which they've had a great and very strong heritage in doing. So get ready to fire in your questions as well to Karina. But Karina, I'm going to hand over to you to present some content to get us off with our programme today.
Thank you, Dan. P'nawn da, good afternoon from Wales. I'll share my slides and I'll go into my presentation. If you can tell me when you can see the slides, then that would be great.
So I can see. Perfect. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Oh, it's gone too far ahead though. Let's go back slightly. Even more. There we go. Okay. So yes, thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm Karina Rutter. I work for the Welsh Local Government Association, representing our 22 local authorities in Wales as a senior policy officer for transport. But I work very closely with the Welsh Government's transport policy team and more specifically the road safety team in Welsh Government. So today, I'm going to take you through really just very briefly for those who might not be as familiar, sort of what is devolved in road safety in Wales, then our road safety partnership plan, as Dan already alluded to, and then I'll talk also briefly at the end about some related work and challenges ahead. So what is devolved? In Wales, we have a bit of an asymmetrical framework, you could call it, I think, of in road safety, where most road traffic law, driver and vehicle regulation obviously remains reserved to the UK Parliament, but especially since the Senedd gained primary legislative powers in transport in 2017, the Welsh Government does hold substantial devolved powers over highways, speed limits, road infrastructure, road safety delivery and enforcement priorities to a certain extent. Obviously, policing and justice isn't devolved, but we have a strong safety partnership called Go Safe. So the Road Safety Partnership Plan itself, it was meant to be called a strategy, but we were getting too close to the election when it was published, so we weren't allowed to call it a strategy. So it is called a partnership plan, which actually is I think, a very suitable name for it. So ours was published earlier this year as well, after the Department for Transport strategy. So ours was published in March and it will run up to 2040. So a little bit of background for you. So we had our previous road safety framework in Wales that was from 2013 to 2020, and there was a midterm review that found that quite a lot of changes were needed in governance, funding, and various other matters really. And then there was a final report that was written quite long after really the framework had come to the end of its life, but that was published in December 2022, and that really marked then the start of really working on a new one. And we worked very early on with Agilysis on a new strategy. And we first looked at a policy and sort of partners landscape review, which was then followed during 2023 and 24 by extensive stakeholder engagement and consultation. This was obviously all happening while we were working also on the introduction of the 20-mile-an-hour default speed limit, which came into force in September 2023. We then, before publishing the partnership plan itself, really, we set up the governance structure around it last summer, and we then managed to publish it in March, just in time, really, before the pre-election period and the elections here in May. So, really, the partnership plan sets out a bold and collaborative vision of transforming road safety, but also reducing road-related harms across Wales, and that features quite strongly in the partnership plan. It is rooted in the principles of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act that we have here in Wales, and also the urgent need to decarbonise transport. So the main aims, obviously, to eliminate road deaths and serious injuries and reduce road-related harms, while also fostering a transport system that is accessible, sustainable and efficient for all. The foreword was signed by our previous minister responsible for transport, but also for social justice and health and social care. It is very much based on Vision Zero and the safe system, so something that you are all obviously very familiar with, so I'm not going to go into that here. So we've also got a target in it, a main head target, that is a 40% reduction in fatalities. It is a significant ambition that will require us to take a sort of fundamentally different approach. So at the end of the period in 2040, we aim to have no more than 58 deaths per year in Wales when looking at the 5-year period of 2035 to 2040. There are additional targets as well in there. So we're looking at the number of pedestrians, killed cyclists, motorcycle riders, young people, older people. But we're also looking at things like reduction in traffic associated air pollution, increase in the number of people walking, wheeling and cycling, and increase in the number of people with protected characteristics, including those with disabilities using the road network independently. Just to go back to this, so the partnership plan doesn't yet have any safety performance indicators in it, so those will need to be set now in a delivery plan we are working on at the moment. But a little bit more on the governance structure, and I'll come back to the delivery plan in a moment. So the governance structure, we have a strategic partnership board at the top, which was chaired by our previous minister, and we have now talked to our new Deputy Minister for Transport as well, and he will continue chairing that partnership board. In the middle, we have a national partnership group, which will very much now become a sort of delivery group or delivery board. We then have 4 safe system component groups. So we have brought the safe roads and safe speeds together in enhancing the road environment. We've got improving the fleet with safe vehicles, thriving road users, so safe behaviour, and then upgrading our response as the post-crash care. We've also just last week had the first meeting of our data and analysts group that will support the drafting of the delivery plan and the safety performance indicators, and will help with monitoring, obviously, progress towards our targets. We are yet to set up a communications advisory group, and that was something that the Strategic Partnership Board was very keen on when they met. So the plan into action, the strategic priorities are there. I won't go into any detail. I think these are quite clear on the safe roads and roadsides, speeds, road users, vehicles and post-collision response. I will talk about these a little bit more later about where we are going at the moment. but really the next steps and delivery. So as I mentioned, the partnership plan does commit Welsh Government to publishing a new a delivery plan, including actions and safety performance indicators, and that's what we are currently really what we're doing at the moment. So the Safe System component groups have now met 3 times so far, and they have suggested areas to look at and safety performance indicators that the data and analyst group will look at now, how they align with the wider safety performance indicators, obviously in the UK strategy, but also what we can measure here in Wales. So that's work that will happen now over the next few months, and we're hoping to publish the delivery plan at the end of the year. As I said, yeah, fully established the data and analyst group. That has happened, but we still need to set up the communications advisory group. Obviously, we're also working together with the Department for Transport and also the other devolved nations, but to be included in the national structures, and our new Deputy Minister did attend the first board meeting. We're also looking at a speed management strategy, trying to bring the sort of engagement, engineering and enforcement all together. And we want to start trialling multi-agency fatal collision review board, and then hopefully make that into a national, more permanent collision review board here for Wales. So some of the related things we're doing, I just wanted to mention, and some of you might know. I'm not going to go into much detail because I think there's not that much time, but things that you might have heard of or might be interested in. We just recently introduced legislation to allow side road zebras in Wales. So highway authorities can now put these in side road zebras, so they are like traditional standard zebra crossings, but without the need to have the Belisha beacons and the zigzags. So I won't go into the detail of this, but if anybody is interested, I can talk about it more. So there was an amendment to the traffic signs regulations and general directions. And we also worked together with Transport for Wales and various other stakeholders to produce guidance for the highway authorities that was published just in time before the pre-election period. Obviously, I already mentioned 20 mile an hour and the results have been really good so far. So obviously we've now got 2 years of full collision data, and in the first year alone, so from September 23 to September 24, there were about 100 people less killed or seriously injured on the roads in Wales. The latest data, obviously of 2025, is unfortunately the numbers are slightly higher than the previous year, but it is still the second lowest annual number recorded in Wales, and collisions were 22% lower than in 2022, the most recent calendar year before the change in the default speed limit was implemented. There's also some of the speed data I've put there. So Transport for Wales is doing the monitoring on behalf of the Welsh Government, and they're going to do that for 5 years. So that's from the latest annual report, which was published last year in July, and the next report will be coming out in the next few months. There's also things like average journey times that have been looked at, and really in the majority of cases, the journey times have really not, so only that they've only gone up by no more than 2 minutes. And the good thing is also that the journey time variability has reduced in actually 45 out of the 60 cases of roads, providing greater certainty on how long a particular journey will take. So what next on speeds? So obviously we're working with Transport for Wales on a project called Streets for All, where we're looking at roads where compliance is still not great. So we're looking at sort of cost-effective speed management measures. We've got a few pilots starting in a few local authorities, and we hope that we can then give some guidance to to the local authorities on that, because obviously the 20 mph speed limit came in simply as a signs and lines. We'll also continue engagement and enforcement through Operation Atal, a roadside engagement operation that the police and fire and rescue services do together here in Wales. I already said Transport for Wales will continue monitoring, obviously, the speeds, collision data and journey times. And the Welsh Government has also commissioned an external 5-year evaluation of the 20 mph policy. We're also working on our own setting local speed limit guidance, which should be published in next year. So challenges ahead, well, I think there are quite a few, but really the biggest one I think is that we're all probably struggling with is really changing driver behaviour and what my colleague from Swansea University calls the culture of motor normativity. And obviously we also have ahead of us the embedding really of the safe system, because we're really just at the start of that journey. We also want to look particularly at young drivers and motorcyclists. We know that they are overrepresented in the statistics. We also want to look at strengthening that post-crash response, but also widening it into, so not only the immediate response, but working with victims and families, and most importantly, really learning from those collisions. And seeing the bigger picture, I think, is a big thing as well, moving really from the sort of traditional way of seeing road safety to road harm reduction, and working much more across different departments, both within Welsh Government and in the local authorities as well. And we've also moved recently in Wales to a regional transport funding model, and that will cause some difficulties for road safety going ahead. So yes, that's all from me. Obviously, very happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Karina. That's fantastic. And we have got some questions started to filter through, but can I just encourage people to add their own questions? I noticed lots of thumbs up and rounds of applause, particularly when you talked about side road zebras. So it might be that there are some questions to come on that. But I wondered whether I could start with a little bit of where you finished, where you're talking about sort of seeing road safety in the bigger context. And certainly from some of my own engagement with colleagues of yours in Wales, when we began some of the stakeholder engagement around the strategy, it felt like the focus that there has been in Welsh Government on well-being of future generations, on active travel, on addressing climate issues, had already created a very sort of fertile space into which, you know, the road safety work could fit. And I was just wondering whether you could sort of speak to that for a bit, really, and how actually moving beyond, you know, seeing road safety in its potential silo to its connection to other policy areas really helps us to deliver something more impactful.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Yes, I think that certainly is true. And as I said, I think we are very lucky in Wales to have that very fundamental piece of legislation that really helps this kind of thinking. And, you know, all public sort of authorities need to really take those things into consideration. But I think it's still difficult because it's, you know, the politics in it all can still quite quickly change that. So although fundamentally I think yes, we've got that, but the reality is still I think that there's still a lot of siloed thinking and a lot of sort of siloed working, but really want to hopefully we can continue you know, that path. And certainly I think there is a better understanding of you know, how these things can work together. And I'm quite glad to see we've got a new Minister for Public Health in Wales now, and they've already reached out, you know, to the Transport Department, and want to look at how you can work better together. So I think that's very encouraging. So I think that will you know, fit in there very well. But I think yes, both both within the national, in the Welsh Government, but also in the local authorities. There's still also lots of work to do to really bring these things together. And in particular, I think, for example, that the active travel and road safety have in the past been sort of seen as opposing, whereas for me they absolutely go hand in hand, and we're all working towards the same goal. And in a way, if the transport system works as it should, as we see it, we really wouldn't need to have road safety separately, would we? Or even active travel, you could argue. We should all be working for, we're all trying to deliver something better for all of us, for all the people. So we should really try to not put ourselves into these opposing camps.
Yeah, brilliant.
Can I ask a question from here? Just touch the phrase of motor normativity is really interesting. Is that something that can be solved by? Is it something that needs to, like, a system and a structure solution and a complete sort of rearranging, or is it something that can be progressed and dealt with through individuals and the way we behave and think?
Well, I think, it is a really difficult question. So this is something, obviously, Ian Walker and Alan Tapp, who have researched, this. It is about how ingrained, that our culture is in sort of thinking that the cars are just there. We don't really question. We don't question why they take up so much parking space. We don't question why we just automatically jump into a car when there are other options. But I think it is something that won't be easy to address, but I think it will need to be addressed at all the different levels. There are obviously things that are completely out of our control. I'm saying, even the Welsh governments or the local authorities, or that are much wider, cultural, societal, controlled by business, money. There's lots of different things, but I think we can all, at our own level, work at it and try to realize it and try to make it better.
Well, as you know, in Powys, we're going to have horse normativity for at least one day of the Royal Welsh Show, because Project Edward will be galloping into the main ring as part of the President's Parade to encourage better understanding of highway code rule number and understanding to pass a horse at 2 meters and a maximum of 10 miles an hour. That's our plan anyway. Anyway, thank you for answering my question, Karina. Kiitos.
I'm conscious, James, I need to hand over to you fairly soon, but there are still some other questions coming through. Rob Gifford has asked about the nature of the indicators, and the National Road Safety Strategy from DFT is very heavily balanced towards lag indicators. Rob wants to know whether you're looking at some leading indicators too.
Yes, is my answer to it. I definitely hope so. That we can do that, because yes, I think we really need to shift our focus to a more proactive approach. Obviously, we will need to continue thinking about places where we've got sort of the historic collisions, but I think overall, yes, I do think we need to move into something much more where we understand the risks. So that's something that we're looking at the moment with Go Safe, our casualty reduction partnership, and together with the local authorities, of how do we get a much better understanding of, where is the risk. And I'm talking about risk not only looking at speed compliance or speeds, but looking at lots of other things as well. And that could be in, if it is in built up areas, that could simply be the presence of people, of pedestrians and cyclists, but also the perceived safety as well. And that's why I think, where I talked about the targets, we built in things like, people with protected characteristics can actually use the access the transport system independently. Those are really important things, and we probably haven't really traditionally tried even to measure. I'm not saying it's going to be easy to measure them, but I think we need to make an attempt.
Yeah, Brilliant. I'm conscious it's we've hit the past, so I need to hand back to James. But Karen, there's still a few questions that are in the Q&A. If you wouldn't mind just jotting a few notes in text responses to those who've submitted them, that would be fantastic. But it's been brilliant to hear about the work and great to see that get published earlier this year. Thanks for your time. James, back over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I just check it. I'm not on mute, am I? No, I'm
we can hear you loud and clear.
Good. I'm very pleased to welcome Commander Kyle Gordon, now the National Police Chiefs Council lead for Operation Topaz. I hope I have this right. The national program to strengthen enforcement and improve road safety outcomes. Commander Gordon brings extensive frontline and strategic experience in using intelligence, targeted operations and partnership working to reduce risk and harm on the roads. Today, he will share how the new Roads Policing Innovation Programme is shaping capability, consistency and delivery across forces in England and Wales. Commander Gordon, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, James. Hello, all. Can I just check I'm not on mute either?
No, we can hear you perfectly.
Good. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come along and have a quick update with you all as to where we have got to. It shows the pace of things, James, that when you were given the spiel as to what my role was, the role has changed since then. The Topaz and the Roads Policing Innovation Programme are all updated and everything is moving ahead at pace. So this is absolutely timely. I see we've got 117 people on the line. That means somebody somewhere will have heard me say some, most, or worst of all of this before. If that is the case, I do apologize. You can, if you know it, go and do your emails, go and do whatever you need to do. But I have to start at the lowest common denominator, which means I'm going to take you a run through. There's only 8 slides, but it is worth just outlining where the Roads Policing Innovation Programme has got to. The formal launch of the National Roads Policing Coordination Centre. So we have in the UK for the first time ever the formal coordination centre launched for roads policing, what that means and how we're linked in with DFT Home Office and the 45 forces around trying to do our part in policing to deliver the key objectives of the road safety strategy. Does that sound like a plan, James?
Yes, it does. Sorry, I couldn't find my microphone to say an enthusiastic yes, but it absolutely sounds like a plan. Thank you very much, sir.
It sounds good. Let's see if I can do it, because I have 8 slides, but the last time I tried to do this, the slides did not go the way they should have gone. So let me see if I can run a slideshow and let me know when it appears on your screen. Is that up on the screens, James?
Not yet.
Oh, what are you seeing? Are you seeing me? Or are you seeing something else on my screen?
We continue to see you.
Okay. Why has that happened? Let me see. Have you got a screen
We are
now?
seeing, yeah, that's all good there now. Thank you.
Yeah, but you're probably also seeing my configuration button at the bottom. I couldn't do a restart before I came on this. Is that blocking part of the screen? Do I need to change screens, switch them around?
It is blocking the lower right.
Not bad. See, this is why you never work with children, animals, or chief officers. So let me see if I can switch things around. And I do apologize.
See, a humble special would never let that happen.
Well, let me see if I can just run this as it is. If this doesn't work, we're just going to have to work with it in the bottom corner, James. I do apologize, but the Met IT is determined to make things difficult for me.
One option is you could email it to me and I could run it for you.
Oh, can I do that? Can I do that?
Well, if you're if it can be sent.
Of course it can be sent. I own it. I own it. So it's entirely up to me. And with apologies to everybody else who's probably getting James at projectedward.org.
That will do nicely.
That's on its way to you as we speak.
Well, Has anyone got a top hat and a cane and some tap shoes for a few moments while I just receive it, and we can crack on?
While you receive it and pull it up, look, I'll start, because look, it's only the slides in the background. Let me do what I can do to try and move things along for you, James. So, just a quick update for everybody. So, most of you will be aware that the Roads Policing Review was running for 6 or 7 years with the Department for Transport linked in with National Roads Policing. That programme of work led to a number of key recommendations coming forward, one of which was that there should be enhanced capability and capacity in the centre. For some of you that have been involved in this, you'll know that we called that Operation Topaz last year, which was simply a shorthand for us being able to differentiate some grant funding from the DFT out to the forces. That all transitioned into the Roads Policing Innovation Programme, RPIP, that some of you will have heard of. And on the back of that, we put together a series of proposals for National Police Chiefs Council in conjunction with the Department for Transport, that we would form a central capability and capacity on the back of the Roads Policing Review. That central capability and capacity has now formally launched. Joe Shiner, the Chief Constable in charge of the Roads Policing portfolio, has written to the Chief Constables and the Chiefs Council and made them aware that we are now live with the National Roads Policing Coordination Centre, so the NRPCC. Apologies, it's a bit of an acronym. You'll get used to us just calling it the Coordination Centre in short. And therefore, the Coordination Centre needed a national coordinator to lead it. And as I was in seat, I have picked up that role. So that is the first correction on where we sit, James, in terms of who I am and what it is we're doing. We have the National Roads Policing Coordination Centre. This piece of work has been done in conjunction, as I say, with Department for Transport, who are funding it. It is the first of its kind centrally funded DFT partnership with National Police Chiefs Council, and it is aligned with the Home Office, and they run with us in terms of those governance panels, making sure that we are aligned fully. Okay, something's up on my screen, James. Does that mean we're up and running?
I think so. That is that in presentation mode. I have clicked the this. Yep, there I think we're good to go.
Okay, as long as you can see then. So let's drop down to the first slide, which is the one I was talking through. So I will just take a second and go through this, because it's important for many of you to understand why it is that we've ended up with the NRPCC, or I'm just going to start calling it the Coordination Centre. It's much easier and it is plain English. So as I say, we ran through the policing journey. I've given you a bit of a heads up on that. One of the main issues for doing that, and one of the main drivers for doing that, is the capacity limitations. When I picked up this role in 2019, I was a full-time commander in the Met, trying to run busy areas in London and trying to do roads policing as a bolt-on. Joe Shiner, as the Chiefs Council lead for the portfolio, is a Chief Constable in her own right, running a busy force, and we just don't have the capacity that we needed. As a result of that, we were able to make the case that we should have that additional capability and capacity in this centre. What we're looking to do is basically three key things. We're looking to deliver business as usual. So you'll all be aware of the Roads Policing Strategy 22 to 25 and the 4 pillars in relation to what we're aiming to deliver. The strategic policing requirement in 2023 put roads policing in as a cross-cutting capability alongside other specialisms such as cyber and firearms. And we're looking to create a responsiveness to emergent threat, risk and opportunity. So some of you will be involved in Operation Cabin, others will be aware of issues with PENTIP, etc. And we needed an ability to be able to respond coherently and in a joined up way across 45 forces to any emergent threat, risk and opportunity. It's a 4-year program of development, and we did significant proof of concept in year 1 through the Topaz and the Summer of Action. For those of you that were involved in that, I won't repeat it all, but effectively HomeSec wrote to forces last year asking for Summer of Action to rid our streets of street level crime and ASB. And we, as roads policing, for the first time ever, asked what we could do in that space, took some funding and ran a number of proof of concept operations with many of you in relation to that. It gives us the capacity to deliver our key activities against the road safety strategy. So it won't be any surprise to you that as the road safety strategy was being developed, we helped shape some of the thinking around that and kept ourselves close so we knew what we would be doing from the get-go. And it allows us to build a program, which is the Road Policing Innovation Program, with formal governance structures to deliver the Coordination Centre for Sustainability. If you want to pop down on the next slide for me, please, James. Right, so what's the NRPCC and why does it matter? Forget about the blurb to the left-hand side. That's my team put that on every time I'm asked to speak about the Coordination Centre. What we're looking to do is we're looking to plug the gap that used to sit for roads policing. This will be no surprise to many of you, but roads policing sits in a bit of a hinterland in that policing is owned by the Home Office, and the Home Office funds policing and directs most of what we do. Road safety, however, is owned by the Department for Transport, who, other than outside the auspices of the British Transport Police, do not have a direct say in policing nor what happens with it. And NPCC roads policing sits aside with the National Police Chiefs Council, and there are linkages across, but of course there's that gap in the middle. The Coordination Centre, that nice blue circle in the middle, that is what we are about. That is my job, is to interact between those three entities. And if you take my series of meetings before I came onto this today I've already had meetings with the Department for Transport, I've had meetings with National Highways, meetings with the Home Office, I have had meetings with our NPCC colleagues around a number of issues, and that is exactly what we are trying to do. We're trying to put roads policing right into the middle of where those policymakers and budget holders are sitting and the thinking that they have about the future and how it is that we can deliver across the board. So what did we do? In year one, we built the foundations through what we called Operation Topaz. If you could bump to the next slide for me, please, James. So that's what we did. Look, you don't need to focus too much on that slide. For the first time ever, what we had was we had a head of Op Topaz, full-time, dedicated, funded, no other responsibilities other than roads policing. That fortuitously for me became yours truly. I had the privilege of being the head of Op Topaz for the UK, and what I was able to make business cases for and build around me was dedicated comms and engagement, responsiveness capability around things like Op Cabin and around pen-tip issues, etc. Commercial vehicle capability that always sat there now joined in with us, alongside an intelligence function, tasking and coordination that we exploited to the full through the summer of action, and brought Dr. Helen Wells on board as our insight and innovation lead. Again, having somebody working directly to the portfolio that has never happened before. So that was year one, building the foundations. It was a very successful year. We know it was successful because our funding went up significantly once we were able to present the findings of the difference that we made in year one. And interestingly, we were getting a lot of positive comments from other National Police Chief Council's portfolios. So we worked with many of them around the summer of action and other bits of work, and we were having the tale told about the cross-cutting capability we were producing by others, which meant that we were able to show that there is absolute merit in roads policing being brought onto a par with some of the other specialisms in policing. Next slide, please, James, for me, if you would. So what have we done since then? We've turned it into the National Roads Policing Coordination Centre, the NRPCC. That structure just gives you an idea of what it is we're building. You don't need to focus on all of the detail, but effectively what we have now is a national coordinator running things for Joe Shiner on behalf of NPCC right across the UK. I'm ably assisted by Head of Operations, many of you will know, former Head of NERPOI, Mark Clothier. The Chief Superintendent, Mark's my Deputy National Coordinator for when we need it. We have sitting across on the left-hand side, then we have an Investigations Intelligence Lead, so Andy Cox, the Detective Chief Superintendent from North Hants is picking up the investigations and intelligence. And then sitting underneath both of them, we have the ops manager in the form of Matt Wilmot, and Matt has a number of functions reporting into him: investigations lead, specialist capabilities lead. Both of those roles we have just recruited to nationally and have identified leads who we're just waiting to leave force and join us in the centre. We've got intelligence coordinator just recruited as well, and we've had Liam and Seed as the coordination and tasking lead for quite some time. On the right-hand side of the model, then we are starting to build our back office function, head of business development and strategy, with the strategic development manager and a number of functions that will help bring us up to the same place where many of the other portfolios are, so we can start to ensure consistency across all of the portfolio for everything from authorised policing practice through to national policy. I'll give you a live example of that. When we updated the ACPO guidance on speeding, and the fact that we still use the ACPO acronym when we talked about updating it gives you an idea of how out of date it was. We realized it had been over a decade since that had been looked at and reviewed. We've recently just worked with road safety support and getting the advice and guidance out to forces around mobile phone and distracted driving. All of that will eventually be driven by the right-hand side of the model. But what does this actually do for us? What does it buy for us? And if we drop down onto the next slide, please, James. So that's what it gives us. It gives us the ability now to approach road safety from a systems approach. Previously, what happened, because we're all doing this part-time, is we'd all get emails from yourselves and from others. They'd land in our inbox. We would do our best to try and deal with it, try and link it up, but it was never as efficient and effective as it could be. Helen Wells and her team have come up with this as our approach, where we will actually do some proper insight into anything that's raised with us. So, for example, when you take the work we're trying to do around drug driving, and there may be questions on that, I'm happy to touch on the drug driving work in a second. Rather than us just running with what happens to be done in a force or two that's working, what we're actually doing is scanning, having a look. James, I think we've dropped down. Yep, there we go, number slide. We're just having a look at what's going on nationally, what's being done internationally, pulling together an approach to that based on evidence and insight, and then running some proper planned activities. So the coordination function starts to run the planning in conjunction with the innovation side of things. I link them across into the Home Office and DFT. And then we launch, as we're doing at the minute with the nitrous work and with the enhanced op limit, we launch delivery, coordinated through the office, and all delivered by the forces with funding where funding's available. Helen and the team then carry out some detailed evaluation for us. That gets fed back in, and any improvements are locked down and shared. The light blue box to the left-hand side, that gives you just a taste of everybody that we engaged with and worked with last year in year one. That's not an exhaustive list, nor is it just a random list. We only put people down in that we've actually carried out some activity with, and it gives you an idea of what the central capability and capacity can do that we didn't used to be able to deliver. So what does that mean for the strategy? So I know the main thrust of this is, 6 months after the strategy, what did the Romans ever do for us, to quote a sitcom? If you drop down on the next slide for me, please, James. So this is what we have agreed, broad brush, our deliverables in years 1 to 3. So we're currently carrying out all of the work around the ghost plates. That bit of work will take us right through this year and possibly beyond that. Violence against women and girls, we did some of that in the summer of action last year, and we're now doing work with a number of forces around the World Cup, linked in with the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force. Drink and drug driving, including nitrous oxide, we have a 3-year plan sketched out that we've agreed in principle with DFT, Home Office and others about how we can move to a position where drug driving is tested for and identified in the same level and same frequency as we do with drink driving across the UK. We've got the commercial vehicle units, and we've just recruited the specialist capabilities lead to come in and help us lead that. Tutelage, that many of you will know about, we will have a look at what we can do to mainstream that for other areas of business. Steve Barry, the ACC, is working with us now full-time across and connected and autonomous vehicles. Responsiveness and critical incident support we've already spoken of with Op Cabin and other incidents that are coming up. High harm, high risk recidivist drivers. Piece of work that the team are looking at is how do we take the most high harm people off our roads in a targeted way, not just responding to things whenever they happen, and support the national operations. I've talked about the World Cup, and we're already working with the Euro 2028 planning team about what that will mean for roads policing in the future. So that's 20 minutes of the 30 minutes taken already. I want to leave some time for questions. Apologies, that's been fast. It's been a whistle-stop tour. All you really need to take away from it is that roads policing now has a national coordination centre in the middle. We're building our team and we are going to be trying to deliver much more effectively the coordination and intelligence function for you across the board. James, back to you for any questions that may be coming.
Thank you very much. But I'll have a look and see what questions are forthcoming. I've got a question, if I may, and it's about sort of focusing, ensuring that you're focused on the right things and the partners that you might be working with, like, I don't know, the chief scientific advisor to policing, the police digital service. How important are they in giving the forces confidence that they're investing in long-term solutions?
Yeah, so it's all absolutely critical. The whole idea of getting 4-year funding was that we didn't just chase the ball into the corner of the pitch, if you'll forgive a really bad football analogy at the moment. And when we start to look at those year 1 to 3 deliverables, if you want to jump back up onto that, they weren't randomly chosen. They are bits of work that we know that we need to deliver in the right way. So if you think about the drug driving element, we're looking at a number of things. We're looking at everything from the legalization of cannabis and what that means for driving in the UK, through to the capacity and cost issues around drug wipes and back office processing, through to what new technologies we might need for roadside testing, right through to legislation for the ability to be able to disqualify people at the side of the road. There's nuanced language around what we're aiming to do there, but effectively use like adult cautions and diversions to take people off the road who admit the offence where there's no aggravating factors in quick succession. So the whole idea of this, James, is exactly the point you've made. We need to be linked in right across everything from Chief Scientific Officer, we need the CPS, HMCTS, DFT, Home Office legislators, right through to Home Office type approval, DSTL, all of these elements. And that's why the central capability is important, because otherwise we just keep doing the same old operations we keep on doing. And as everybody in this call knows, we have plateaued largely in the last 10 years in the UK in terms of preventing road harm.
Thank you. There's a question here relating to the criteria for high harm drivers. Do you only look at their driving history, or is it wider?
Oh, thanks, Rhiannon. So it's early days for this, and if you want to be part of it, drop us an email. I'll put you in touch with Matt, Helen, and the team. But it's going to be much wider. Our whole idea around this is that we start to look at all of the drivers for harm, and we start to get away from simply dealing with the symptoms. Look, I didn't grow up in the roads policing world. I grew up in the firearms and public order world. I'm used to dealing with intelligence. I'm used to trying to get upstream of problems and deal with them before they become an issue. When I came across the roads policing in 2019, and I only came by accident because I headed up the Met's uniform specialist operations side of the house, and I realized that roads policing was very much, through no fault of its own, dealing with the symptoms as opposed to the causes. So Rhiannon, your question is absolutely spot on. We're going to be looking at much, much wider. So I'll give you one example of that, Rhiannon. So some of the work we're doing at the minute around violence against women and girls, the World Cup, and drink and drug driving, we asked ourselves the question, or we hypothesized, as Helen would tell me to use, that actually people involved in drink driving, drug driving, might have recidivist history in violence against women and girl type offences. We got that proven in a couple of proof of concept operational sprints. We then took it out further and we started to look at who else might be involved. And actually there's some work out in Australia that's showing that actually some victims of violence against women and girls go on to commit motoring offences because of what has happened to them in the past. So Rhiannon, we are looking much, much wider than just dealing with the symptoms. We're actually trying to look at the causes, and where appropriate, we're trying to divert people to keep the roads safer through proper preventative policing, not just by hitting people with fines and disqualifications. I know I'm speaking at pace, James, but I'm keen to give people an opportunity to ask, because I think this is probably the first time many will have heard of the coordination centre that has just been launched.
Yeah. Tony Burden asks, will the centre be able to look at the well-documented issues of the I'm going fast now as well, the underreporting of by the public of road traffic collisions to police forces and the quality of Stats 19 data reporting provided by the forces? Data is fundamental to the safe system response.
Lovely. Who said that? Give me a name.
Tony Burden.
Tony, well done, Tony. It sounds like you have been in many of my briefings, or else it's just obvious common sense. I started off the whole conversation with DFT and others by saying that when you look at the national decision-making model for policing, the first box is information intelligence. It is absolutely critical that we have the right intelligence. Look, many of you know for many years I have been saying that Stats 19 is useful to an extent, but it is like opening codes on crime records. We don't need opening codes, we need closing codes. We need to know what the actual offence was. And we know that the data, for example, when we looked at speeding initially, and then Andy Cox and others did the detailed piece of work in London, we realised that speeding was prevalent in many, many more cases than we originally thought. So you're right, we are already having those conversations around what the future of data might look like. This is why part of the grant we got was to bring on a data and intelligence officer and data and insights on the right-hand side of the model. So we absolutely will be looking at that. So you're spot on. Intelligence, if we get that wrong, the rest of it is a shot in the dark at best.
Alan Watson says, and as I've missed it, apologies if I have, most of the coordination centre appears to be focusing on enforcement and intel. Has education been considered utilising community speedwatch volunteers, for example, as they are able to provide lots of time roadside?
Yeah, so you're right. The initial work is all going to be around trying to get us fit for purpose in what policing's primary role that we can do that nobody else can do, which is around the enforcement side. That doesn't mean that that is exclusively where we're at, and as we get those bits professionalized and landed and start to make a difference and start to show that there is some return on investment for DFT and others in what they have paid, yes, by all means we can look at those other areas. But honestly, if I was to tell you that we have hundreds of things that we could be doing, we have many tens of things that we should be doing, and we've got a handful that we absolutely must do in order to prove our worth and prove that the continued funding is both necessary and of value to government. We are going to be focusing on the policing element of things, the things that we can do that nobody else can do for now. You're absolutely right. We do need to get the education bit. We do need to get upstream. That's why we're talking around the diversionary elements, etc. But for now, just with all of the capacity that we have, it does sound, Alan, like we are focused in on that area of business, because we are.
Thank you very much. One more question, which will take us neatly to a round of e-cornettos that Agilysis have agreed to provide at 3 o'clock. This is prevention. Road collision investigation authorised professional practice says roads policing lead investigators should ensure that longer-term prevention, intelligence and enforcement opportunities with regard to wider road policing and road safety issues are identified and shared. In Peter's experience of inquests, that's with Thames Valley Police, this rarely happens, leading to only 3% of road death inquests leading to a prevention of future death report. Should there be more emphasis on this from roads policing, and if so, how? So
short answer is yes, absolutely, and that is part of the reason why Andy Cox, as a Detective Chief Superintendent, is coming across. Well, he's in the portfolio, but is formalising the role within the structure to be able to ensure that our investigation side of things is taken forward. One of the roles that we have only just recently got through the board in terms of approval, so you're hearing this hot off the press, is the funding to be able to bring in a DCI, Detective Chief Inspector level, to try and professionalise everything from the investigations right the way through to how we capture all of the stuff from PFDs, etc. So if you know anybody who is a DCI who wants to come across and work with us in the roads policing world to help shape national policy, please get hold of them, get them in touch with me. We will be putting that advertisement out shortly. Thank you. Is that us up to time then, James?
That's it. With 40 seconds to go till 3 o'clock, we will let you go, Commander. Thank you so much Commander Kyle Gordon, for joining us and sharing all of this exciting innovation update. We are very grateful, and that will lead us neatly round to where we're going to give you a 10-minute break. So go and recharge your water bottle or grab your ice creams, and we will then welcome Simon Turner and Saul Jevons at 10 minutes past 3. See you then, everybody. Thank you. Well, my watch says it's 10 past 3, so we're going to carry on. Dan, any thoughts so far before we just move on with the agenda? Any reflections on what we've picked up so far?
I just thought it was a great first half of our session this afternoon, James. I think it was interesting, actually. I was reflecting on the first of the oral evidence sessions that were given to the Transport Select Committee a few weeks ago, where the panel of experts who were gathered, which include people like PAX, the RAC Foundation, Brake, ROSPA, etc., were saying the strategy is great. We need to get on with starting to deliver. And I think what we've already begun to hear in the presentations that we've had so far is we are moving into getting some of these things in place. The coordination centre, which Commander Carl Gordon's just talked about, actually starting to see policing getting its resources lined up and getting fit for purpose for the next period. I know there's been a lot of preparation into that, but it does mean that early in the strategy, we're going to see policing hitting the ground running with some additional coordination resource, which is fantastic. And obviously great to hear the example of Wales, where they're looking at how they take responsibility for road safety forward there. So I think we had some great content. Looking forward to what comes next.
Thank you very much, Dan. And we will go straight on. And because the time has come where we will take a look at the role of fleet and the opportunity for forward-thinking private sector operators to move faster on implementation using data, operational leadership and evidence-led interventions to strengthen safety performance and reinforce wider road safety objectives. And here to do this for us are Saul Jevons and Simon Turner. I hope that you're both there and ready to pick up for that. So Saul is of course chair of the Association of Road Risk Management. Simon from Driving for Better Business, and I think you've got an event you're going to tell us a little bit about after the summer. But I will hand over to you, but I shall be listening closely because I shall probably have some questions. So Saul Jevons and Simon Turner, thank you.
Fantastic. So shall I start and give an update as to kind of where we are, and then we can discuss
yeah, sounds good,
our thoughts for how we then help the DFT progress this throughout the year. So it was interesting that Commander Gordon was talking about some of the things that were already in place and are then being built up to help deliver. I think what's key to understand about the work-related road risk part of the charter, and specifically the ambition to run a pilot charter, is that we're basically starting from scratch here. So we've started with a couple of pretty large meetings that were convened by the Department for Transport with a large number of stakeholders, so that we could start to understand people's thoughts on what that charter should contain. And those were chaired by Claire Rees from Department for Transport, whose team put the strategy together. And Claire also then very kindly came and spoke to an audience in a theatre we were running at the UK's largest health and safety event at the NEC right at the end of April. And she talked through what their department's ambitions were for fleets, and obviously that it's looking to go beyond what legal compliance is and look at promoting industry accepted good practice. In general, those comments were really well received by the fleet operators and the health and safety managers that were there. And that's been backed up by a lot of the conversations that we've had with various fleets of various sizes over the last 6 months, who, the whole concept of the charter seems to have landed pretty well, certainly with those fleets who are already looking at managing their driver safety well, or are engaged on that journey. And what we found is that smaller fleets operators who might supply into bigger companies, they're looking at supporting the charter, signing up to that as a way of differentiating themselves from competitors when they're tendering. Larger fleets are very keen to use this as a way of understanding which of their suppliers are managing this crucial aspect of business governance at the very least the bare minimum legal level, because a lot of companies don't do that, and some of the larger clients do have a vicarious liability to ensure that their supply chains manage all aspects of health and safety to the required level, not just those who are driving. So we've had, in a whole, we've had a very, very positive response, and in part because a lot of the companies that do this well, that we would traditionally hold up as role models to companies that are maybe further back on the journey, one of the things that really gets companies tendering for business rolled up is when they know they're investing in running a safe, efficient business, and they're investing in that. They've got training in place, they've got policies and procedures that staff are expected to follow, and they've got systems for monitoring all those systems, so they know they're delivering a high quality service, is when they get underbid for contracts, and particularly public sector contracts. They get underbid by companies they know are cutting corners, and so virtually all the fleets we've spoken to see this as a really valuable contribution to eliminating that part of that unfairness within the tender process. So, so I don't know, have you seen similar stuff from that?
Yeah, I think so that in terms of the way that fleets are looking at it, I think there's been a lot of interest of people, initially were saying, well, what's it going to contain? DfT seem to have quite sensibly said, okay, before we get to what's it going to contain, we need to decide who it's for. Do we need something really broad and high level that will encapsulate any organization who's got anyone doing anything for work at all, or actually do we need to have it maybe split by sector? Or so they're examining a different number of ways of doing it. They're also looking at what level that needs to be set at. So are we looking for people to say, okay, I sign up to being bare legal minimum compliance, in which case you kind of have to ask yourself how much that's going to raise the bar, or do we set it as something more challenging, in which case are you just giving a gold star to the people who are already doing the best practice stuff, or do you set it somewhere between the two so that you're bringing people up a little bit? It gives them something achievable to reach for, but it's not necessarily hitting that gold standard just yet. So I think at the moment they're in the middle of bottoming out all of those kind of questions before they determine actually what goes into it. And there's a number of different existing programs and standards and that kind of thing, which they're looking at to say, okay, actually, how does that work? How could that, or elements of that, be adapted and brought across into a charter? And actually, is that something that fleets want to sign up for? Because ultimately there's a recognition that the success of this is whether fleets actually want to A, sign up to it, and B, then live what they've signed up to. Because there's no point to getting a whole load of sign-ups who aren't actually doing the things, but equally there's no point in having something that's really great if nobody will sign up to it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we're looking to affect over the coming months, isn't it? Because with the stakeholder consultations that we had chaired by the DfT, there was some involvement from fleet operators, but there wasn't as much as I think we would have found beneficial. And so one of the things we need to do, as you say, is it's got to be practical for fleets to implement. I think the potential benefits from this are really great, but it's got to be easy for them to implement and easy for them to require supply chains to do that. So there's the gap at the moment, I think, as we both see it, is we need more operator involvement in this development process to ensure we create something that they can work with.
Yeah, and there's a lot of issues going on in parallel as well. So one of the issues which was raised is whether it's a charter that applies to volunteers, because volunteers don't fall under the same health and safety framework as employees. So there was a discussion about, oh no, you can't say people who are driving for work, because if it's a volunteer, they're not driving for work, they're volunteering. That falls out in a different category. And I think the feeling was, no, it's a road safety thing. It needs to cover, if you're driving for an organisation, that's what the organisation should ideally be signing up for. So there's a number of things where we need to square the circle within government on certain things. Also, in parallel to that, there's been the RIDDOR consultation, which wasn't directly about things like whether RIDDOR should apply across to the road environment, but it's certainly something which PACs have encouraged people to respond to with a, I think it's by the time you got to something like page 47, it's a consultation that's closed now, but it was encouraging people to go on there and say, actually, there's a disconnect between these two things. And at the moment, people aren't necessarily, so we're talking to a number of large operators, they've got a really good track on how many of their contractors have had a driver with a sprained ankle, but they don't know how many third parties they've injured, because at the moment that falls outside their collecting criteria. So there's a whole load of that kind of stuff, but it's something where other industries have managed to do it. So the rail industry, as you know, have a really good framework on this. They will tell you as an industry that, oh, actually, it's not performing nearly as, it's got all sorts of problems with it in making it work and all the rest of it, but actually it's streets ahead where most of the rest of road transport is, in terms of its management of managing occupational road safety more generally. And then there are sectors like oil and gas where they went through this probably 25 years ago now, of trying to set in their case, a recommended practice that everyone signed up to. It was relatively detailed, but it wasn't a scheme that was audited by a central body. It was down to each contractor to say, yes, I will sign up to, I'm going to base what I do on OGP 365, which was the recommended practice document. And then having done that, each of the contracting organisations would say, okay, we will either take your word for it, or more commonly, we will audit you against that and make sure that you are actually doing what you say you're doing.
So the RIDDOR conversation is interesting and really does need to be had, because in the industry, in a lot of hazardous industries, the introduction of RIDDOR was responsible alone for massive reductions over a period of years, of massive reductions of workplace incidents, wasn't it? So the implication is that it should have a similar impact on driving for work incidents. And in the absence of that, a charter which is maybe self-policed by larger organisations will go some way towards achieving similar things, but it's not going to be as good, is it?
Yeah, and HSE's argument in part is that actually RIDDOR is already a flawed data set, because the least responsible companies don't report stuff under RIDDOR anyway. It would need to be kind of recordable under RIDDOR, but probably not reportable in the same category as other incidents, because HSE won't have the capability to or capacity, I should say, to investigate it. And HSE argue that actually through Stats 19, if we had the purpose of journey, etc., properly recorded, and the police were then investigating those in depth, then actually that would cover it off far better than RIDDOR could. The downside, of course, is we know that actually the vast majority of things don't have anything recorded for purpose of journey. That the highest category on there is unknown, and actually the police generally don't have the time to do effective investigations into employers, other than in particular cases involving sort of vehicles with O licenses, etc. But yeah, so there's a whole it's a complex mesh of sort of interwoven stuff that all needs bottoming out. But I think I'm almost quite pleased that we're not seeing announcement that there's going to be a charter and then 3 months later, oh, and here's the charter, because it does need a whole load of stuff working out to make sure that what we end up with is something which is going to be effective.
Yeah, I think we're almost out of time, Saul. So do you just want to briefly outline the event that ARM and PACs are running to fill in some gaps?
So essentially, if people have a look at the events section on the ARM website, we're doing a joint conference with PACTS on September the 16th, which is basically supporting DFT in pulling industry together to work out what the shape of the charter should be, what should be in it, etc. So it'll be a combination of some presentations about some of the issues, some of the other potential models that have been used across different industries, and then some workshop sessions to actually try and get to the bottom of what the profession collectively and industry actually think is going to work. And there are, I don't think the booking link is open on the PACTS website yet. But yeah, if you do book, either if your organisation is a member of PACTS or if you as an individual are a member of ARM, there are very significant discounts. So you can get double a discount of what an ARM membership would cost you.
Oh, thank you both, Saul Jevons and Simon Turner. Could I invite you, before you do anything, just to take a look at the Q&A? There are some unanswered questions that you might be able to just deal with offline, but time doesn't allow us to go any further here.
No problem.
Simon, sorry, you were about to say something.
Yeah, no, only that I can't see the Q&A. So if you send me any questions, I'll happily look at them after and supply any answers if required.
Brilliant. Simon and Saul, thank you both very much. And now I think we turn our attention to speed management and rural road safety, two areas where evidence, public expectation and political debate often intersect. Here with more, Dan Campsell.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Yeah, going to pick up the conversation now, because one of the key themes that's identified within the National Road Safety Strategy is the theme of rural roads. And not surprising, as many of us will know, because rural roads are where around about 2/3 of fatalities occur. And there are some peculiar conditions associated with those rural roads, often not engineered to the highest standards, often carrying high volumes of traffic at relatively high speed. So we are going to be joined now by a panel to discuss that. So if I can ask them to turn on their cameras, because I am going to be joined by a couple of my colleagues, Bruce Walton and Suzanne Coles, and also going to be joined by Duncan Knox, Will Cubbin, Rob Torrock. We were also going to have Chris Binks with us from Wesker Tech, but and talk about, sort of mic drop moment. He left us because he had to do a demo for a government minister. So just to let you know why he's not with us this afternoon. But great to have this esteemed panel with us, and a decent opportunity to talk about the particular challenges associated with rural roads. Because there's 5 of you guys, I'm going to ask, please do feel free to use the raise hand feature in Teams if you've got things to contribute, just so I don't sort of gloss over and move on to the next question if you've got stuff to say, and I will direct questions a little bit to different ones of you at different points. But I guess we ought to start with that sort of that challenge of why rural roads are a peculiar issue in road safety, why they present us with a number of particular challenges. And Duncan, I wonder whether I start with you. I mean, you've obviously been looking after the rural road network there in Surrey for a number of years. What are the sort of things that particularly sort of set rural roads apart, and the challenges that you face as a highway authority?
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I think one of the issues with rural roads is, of course, the default limit on these non-built up areas is 60 miles an hour. And clearly that is kind of quite crazy when you consider how small and narrow a lot of these roads are, and it's kind of quite meaningless. So I think trying to understand how we can change the speed limit on those. For me, you can't have a safe systems approach with safe speeds as an important tenet of that without reducing rural speed limits. You have some of our main roads in Surrey have been reduced to 40 or 50 because of a history of casualties and because of the amount of traffic that they take. But then you turn off those roads onto a narrow country lane and suddenly the speed limit goes up to 60. We've had a lot of lobbying to change some of those speed limits, but it's usually one road at a time where the people live on that road or the parish council in that area ask for it. And the cost benefit for doing one road at a time is not very compelling. And so that's why we've embarked on a kind of strategic area wide process on cracking on with that. And one of the things I think currently in national guidance is that you can have rural speed limits as low as 40 where it's not built up, but it doesn't really say you can have it as 30 or 20. And we've kind of ignored that because it's guidance only. And we've cracked on and said, well, the existing speeds on this single track country lane are about 23. So we're slapping in a 20-mile-an-hour limit.
And how's that gone down? Because obviously there will be those who, well, I say obviously, I mean, there might be those who would push back against that and say, what on earth are you doing? But you're clearly taking an evidence-led approach. So what's that doing for the way in which those roads are used, and indeed how communities have accepted that?
I think a lot of the communities are really delighted, the people who live on those roads and the communities that use them. So it's very much supported by parish councils and local elected members and the horse riding community and people who walk and cycle. There is a lot of opposition as well. As soon as you reduce speed limits, the kind of string back leather driving glove brigade don't like impingements on their freedom to drive how they want to. So we do get a lot of the kind of backlash from that. But I can easily respond to that by saying the speed limits that we are setting are very similar to the level that most people are driving at anyway. So what's the problem?
Brilliant. I can't imagine there's any of the string back leather glove driving brigade in leafy Surrey. That's who knew? Rob Turrock, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, and thanks for those comments. Thanks, Dan and Duncan. I think it's really curious, isn't it, where vehicle ownership and responsibility of drivers sits within our culture and society. And I think one of the things that strikes me when I think about sort of a systems view of it is we talk about the safe system, and in organizations we've talked about risk, and there's this sort of concept within risk that it's something that you don't think about, risk management. It's something you start talking about. It's something that you're doing a lot of, and it's just the way things are done around here. And I think there's a sort of maturity matrix there. And I think one of the troubles with safe system is we mention safe system a lot, but I think it's quite immature in our systems and not very well understood and not very well balanced across the whole components of it. And we can strengthen each of the components as much as we wish, but if drivers continue to choose excess speeds, that dominant effect is going to outweigh the other benefits. And we must carry on working at all levels, of course we must. But the thing I think I'm really excited about with this strategy and the ambitions in it and the boldness of it is it provides us an opportunity, if we can raise the challenge and run with it, to change the public and society's attitudes to speed. Because yes, you say, oh, I'm going to put a 20-mile-an-hour limit in, and people say, oh no, you're restricting our liberties. Now, I've been a pre-hospital critical care doctor for 14 years. When I go to collisions and someone is severely injured or dying, that's absolute, irreversible, never coming back. And the scale of harm and injury and death that is affecting the victims, the families, the friends, and the drivers that have caused those or been involved with those incidents, it's absolutely massive, isn't it? As well as the costs. And this, I think, is one of the massive gaps and the opportunities we have to change the public's and drivers' awareness of this so that they support these interventions, know why we're doing it, and applaud it. I live in a little village and it's got a 60-mile-an-hour limit through it, and it's ridiculous. You've got roads both sides, you've got children, vulnerable adults, pets that are used to there not being much traffic there, and then suddenly there's a vehicle going through at 60 miles an hour. We need national leadership on this, and a default of 20 for these villages and urban areas, but we're talking about rural. So the villages, the single lanes, with an opt-out if people wish, and once we know it's safe.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Rob. Will, I was going to come to you, and obviously you've got your RSGB hat, but you're also long history of working on improving the safety of roads in Essex, and you'll know as well as any of us what the data says. But also I'm interested, one of the things that Essex has been trying to do is sort of rebalance that public debate around function of roads and what appropriate speeds look like. So what have you been doing in Essex, and what might we learn from that?
I think maybe I need a background with 2 logos on it to cover this eventuality. Yeah, so there is a speed management, a proposed speed management strategy that went out for consultation shortly before local elections, where the administration of Essex moved from a Conservative administration to one of reform, which is interesting politically, but not perhaps as clear cut as one might expect. So there is support for the objectives within the new administration. There are differing views over the best way to get there. The hierarchy really is somewhat been already covered by Rob, in that it's how that road is used. So a place and movement function. To what extent is a road has more of a movement function? To what extent does it have more of a place function? And the work that Bruce carried out, that has been cited in the road safety strategy, that there is more than one type of rural road, is very important there. And the Essex strategy recognises that and has a matrix in order to distinguish your large interurban routes. We have the A120, which is a national highways road due to its strategic importance, but it is a single carriageway rural road. And equally, you look at in the data, we have very small rural roads. They need to have different speed limits. They have different functions, different usage, and different risks on them. So yeah, it's the fact that they're not homogeneous, and they also have different profiles of casualty on them. So I think one of the first steps is to use Bruce's work to look at those roads differently and understand what interventions needed.
Brilliant. Well, that's a nice segue. I might as well come to Bruce to sort of pick up that conversation, and then probably bring Suzanne in as well. So not all rural roads are the same, Bruce. Discuss.
No, Dan, they are not. And I should say, of course, that it's nice of you to credit it as my work, Will, but the paper that was published was Smith, Coles and Walton, very much in descending order of importance. And it was published under the auspices of, and thanks to funding from the RAC Foundation. So acknowledgement to them for that support. But indeed, the main point is rural roads vary very, very much indeed. When people hear the word rural road, they normally think that what they're going to look at is something like that I've just shared. Yeah, that's definitely a rural road. Yeah, but you just heard Will describing the A120, and correct me if I'm wrong, Will, but the A120 doesn't look anything like that. Yeah,
not even close.
Not even close. And that's probably more like those roads that Duncan's putting a 20-mile-an-hour road limit on, that he's then going to slip on that lovely pair of gloves so he can go and enjoy motoring down them. So this is our dilemma. The word rural road conjures up an image in people's head which is not necessarily a helpful or accurate one for the large majority of situations. And it's all very well to be in a position to make appropriate interventions in order to make rural roads a safer transport environment when you can take them one case at a time, as you can perhaps if you're doing a detailed speed limit review in the way that Duncan described, but is much, much harder to do if you're a local authority with an enormous rural network and a limited amount of available capacity and resource, and you need to decide what your priorities are on different kinds of rural road. Now, the data that's always been published up till now, rural road doesn't actually mean a rural road like the one I just flashed you a picture of at all. It means a road running through a rural area as defined by the Office of National Statistics. Yeah, and just because an area is statistically rural doesn't tell you anything at all about the roads that are in it. In fact, it can be positively misleading about the roads in it. So the work that we did selected a completely random sample of rural roads in that old meaning, which really means roads running through rural communities. And then we picked up lots of different road attributes from various different sources and tried to develop a taxonomy that allowed us to separate the roads into clusters so that we could better understand what the how those roads were distributed between different areas, how different categories of road danger were distributed between them, and how different engineering and enforcement and intervention priorities could best be distributed between them. What we identified was 4 general clusters of road, which are those listed in that little table there. You're liking this impromptu presentation I'm doing here. We identified 4 superclusters of rural roads, completely excluding motorways: principal roads, country roads, neighbourhood roads, and winding roads. And each of those we divided down into 2 or 3 more specific clusters that had specific sets of meaningful identifiable attributes in common. And the DFT liked that enough that it was mentioned in the road safety strategy as being a necessary data building block to help local authorities, police forces, all kinds of other stakeholders engage more precisely with the question of how do we address the safety of our rural road network, because we can at least start by defining our terms and trying to understand what we do. And so at this point, I think I would probably give way to Suzanne, who did a lot of the work on checking the original research to make sure that the attributes and the clusters that we'd identified were meaningful and useful, neither too broad nor too narrow, sufficiently precise, but also sufficiently loose that they would work across a national area, and talk a little bit about the work that we're engaged in the early stages of now to try and develop that into a taxonomy.
Thank you, Bruce. It's a beautiful segue. Yeah, so as you've given that explanation there of the 2-tiered taxonomy that you've developed, it was clear from the classification that we determined that there are some distinct differences in rural roads from those regional distributors and primary roads through to country lanes and hill passes, like the image that you shared a few minutes ago. And a lot of those differences can be in characteristic that would be very apparent to many members of the public, and certainly probably to the audience on the webinar this afternoon. Characteristics such as road width, the traffic volume that the road is carrying, distance to local conurbation, number of lanes that are available to traffic, and even down to gradients and also sinuosity, so how wiggly the road is. As you might imagine, again, those sort of roads that fell in within the supercluster P, those primary routes, they tend to be the straighter roads than the country lanes and hill passes. So yeah, we found lots of differences between them, and that really helped to reinforce the taxonomy that we developed. And as Bruce has mentioned, then that work was cited in the road safety strategy, and we are working alongside the DFT to consider how that taxonomy, based on a sample of roads across the Great Britain, can be applied to a contiguous network. And can be then applied to Stats 19 data, and also ultimately a whole wealth of other data sets to help local authorities and road authorities in how they manage not only road risk, but also it can contribute to how they might manage active travel, winter maintenance, highway maintenance, all sorts of different things. So yeah, we're in the early stages of that work at the moment. We're just trying to, having used a wide range of data sets to develop the taxonomy. We determined from that which data sets we felt were most significant in influencing those the assignment of different roads to those clusters and superclusters. And so using those more significant data sets, we're then developing then a code to apply to a whole network. Obviously, applying a code to a contiguous network rather than a sample of individual road corridors across the whole of Great Britain will throw up some extra challenges and may even throw up some slight variations to the original taxonomy. We'll have to see, but that is our plan, to apply it to a contiguous network, see what we get. Hopefully we'll be close to the taxonomy that we've already developed, and we'll be able to reach out to those local authorities and that will be working with us on the project, and ask them to sort of validate it using their own local knowledge of the routes, and then hopefully have something that will be able to be rolled out nationwide.
That's brilliant, Suzanne. So interestingly, I was asked this question when I was giving evidence to the select committee. They picked up on the rural road taxonomy work, and then the question was, so what might we therefore do once we've coded these rural networks in data? Interested in views around the panel, actually. I'm going to start with you, Suzanne, on so we define how we classify these bits of the network, but then, sort of what would we expect local authorities and their partners to be doing about it and to be doing differently?
Yeah, so there's lots of opportunity here, I think, for road authorities to use this rural road classification. I mean, the obvious one in terms of the topic for this webinar is around either speed management, using those different classifications to then say, right, okay, this is a typical characteristic of this group of rural roads. And that can be linked to road function as well in many cases, and therefore we can assign a speed management strategy linked to those to that taxonomy, and also in terms of road safety, then consider risk relative to those different types of rural roads. So we did do a very small amount of analysis of Stats 19 data related to different roads within the different categories of the taxonomy, and we saw some clear differences between. Thank you very much, Bruce. Yes, so we saw some distinct differences between the types of crashes that had occurred on the different types of rural roads. So on those roads within supercluster W and certainly N, where you might expect to see more active travel users, then there were more collisions involving those walkers and cyclists. Again, on roads within supercluster W, very sort of traditional rural roads, I suppose, what we all might think of when we say rural roads. We also tended to see an increase in, or a higher level of runoff collisions. And the same can also be said for, what have we got there? Supercluster P as well in the dark green. I think the other thing that we found that perhaps not shown in that particular graph is that the collision dynamics varied as well. So on the regional distributors and primary roads, we saw a number of rear impact, possibly linked with collisions where you've got congestion on the approach to junctions, for example, or whereas in those more, as I say, more traditional rural roads where you've got the runoff collisions, then impact is side impact with roadside features. So there's real opportunity for road authorities to look at the levels of risk and then to manage those with infrastructure changes light clearing, roadsides, that sort of thing.
Brilliant. Will, you wanted to come back in there?
Yeah, to really kind of follow up on that question about what road authorities should do. I first of all would want to turn that around a bit and say that the local highway authorities need more central government guidance and clearer standards that relate to each of those types of rural road, because one of the things we're lacking is consistency and predictability. There's plenty of research that shows the manner of people's driving is much more predicted by the look and feel of the road. So if they are used to behaving in a certain way on a road that looks one way, they move to another jurisdiction and the rules change, their driving is not going to change. So there's a need for consistency. And I think one of the risks of devolution is where you have county level highway authorities being split into more than one unitary highway authority. You're going to have more different highway authorities. So there's a risk the level of consistency could reduce. So that really increases the need for a stronger standard, stronger guidance coming from central government to try and create that consistent approach that is informed by the risk of each type of road.
Yeah, I think one of the things that came up in those discussions was around providing the tooling, and that means guidance, but it also means the sort of the analytical tools and a consistency of approach, because that inconsistency reduces credibility. Bruce, come to you briefly, and then I want to go to Rob and talk particularly about sort of rural roads and how we manage emergency response in those locations. So Bruce, if you go next.
No, absolutely, and accessibility and the speed of emergency response, given that remoteness is one of the key attributes that we actually hit on in determining different aspects of rural roads, is obviously an important consideration. I was just going to say, on the consistency point that Will was talking about, one of the key cornerstones of the work we're currently engaged in with DFT is making sure that all the road attributes that we use to establish the taxonomy are free public data sources that are going to be consistently nationally available over a number of years. So a type of road in Essex is reasonably comparable to a type of road in Shetland if they've got the same cluster, and that consistency across boundaries is one of the important things that we were seeking to achieve.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Bruce. Yeah, so Rob, particularly, with your experience as an emergency medical practitioner and working in a part of the world that has some of our most beautiful sort of rural locations, what are some of the peculiarities that we see from that post-crash element in terms of things that we could potentially strengthen? You talked about sort of the safe system. We need to make sure that we address these things in a systemic way.
I think that the key thing, I think, for me, is increasing people's awareness of the reality out there of what actually happens when there are collisions, when they choose excess speed, because people aren't aware enough and don't understand enough until they're involved in a collision or their loved one are. And then it's suddenly, oh, how did that happen? Why didn't you tell me it happened so fast? I didn't mean it, I didn't see them. And it's all far too late. And we need to mobilize that understanding and that experience and be a voice for the victims and prevent this happening in the future. We need to immunize the system from future incidents. And a big bit of that is taking the learning from these collisions and looking at it and action to reduce future collisions. And it's not more data, it's not more analysis. That needs to go on. We need to carry on the research and all that good work, but don't let that distract us from actual action that is going to reduce killed and seriously injured. As far as the challenges of rural roads for the actual medical response goes, we know that if we can get first aid and critical care to a critically ill and injured patient within 15 minutes, it makes a massive difference on their survival. So, yeah, more resources to the ambulance services, more rollout of 24/7 availability of critical care teams. But in addition to that, it's the public and it's bystanders, it's first aid training in schools, it's empowering people to do what they would need doing to them if they were in that situation, as opposed to not being aware of what to do, that the initial, looking after someone's airway, checking they're all right, trying to get them out, that side of things. There's a lot of work that could be done on that. I think the big thing for me, coming back to the sort of original remit, is the safe system. That the biggest problem with our safe system is the predominant risk factor is speed, and we live in a society that accepts, we talk about speed limits and that a lot of people are exceeding them, let alone that there's a 60-mile-an-hour limit on these single track roads and it's not safe to go at 60, and we're presuming and assuming that people are going to go at 30. It's even worse than that. They're actually exceeding the speed limits. And until we as society grapple with that and understand and get engagement from drivers and road users and policymakers that has to be a zero tolerance to breaking the law, and then push that on to appropriate speeds, then I think it's going to be really challenging to break the spiral. But I think that the road safety strategy is bold, it's ambitious. We need to run with that and really use this opportunity.
Brilliant. Duncan, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight something that's being identified as a bit of a problem, particularly on rural roads, that colleagues across the southeast in engineering teams have identified. That I just want to share with you, in that rural crossroads are becoming increasingly a problem, and we suspect strongly that this is to do with sat-navs. Despite these locations having bright yellow backed give way signs and stop signs and every measure you can think of, drivers are going straight through the crossroad without giving way on a number of occasions. And it's felt that maybe they're following the instructions of the sat-nav that says continue straight ahead, without realizing they have to give way, or maybe they're following the pictorial images on the sat-nav that it's just kind of a blue line through the crossroads without realizing they have to give way. So a colleague, Nigel Flower from Devon, is leading on this and working with Ordnance Survey to see if we can get sat-nav companies to improve the information they provide to drivers. It could take some time, but I just wanted to trail that because I think that's a particular issue for rural roads, and it's quite a serious one. There's nothing more we can do engineering-wise at these locations.
It's a really interesting point. So I've just spent 2 days with the road safety teams in Cornwall talking safe system, and they've obviously sort of been a part of similar discussions. And if we're going to approach rural road safety in a holistic safe system way, actually that safe vehicles component of the information that's being fed to the driver and the way that the on-vehicle technology works is also a key element of that. Brilliant. We're getting very close to time, so I'm going to take this point to thank our panel for all of their brilliant contributions on rural roads and speed management. So to Rob, to Will, to Duncan, to Suzanne, and to Bruce, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon and adding so much to the conversation. And James, you're back. What have you taken from the session that we've had in this second part?
I think what I wish I knew more about engineering. I wouldn't claim to be, but I think what Rob was saying about the speed and the can we get away from the fact that it's somebody, this is, take it like this. If somebody runs out of a supermarket with a load of shopping that they haven't paid for and they get caught in the car park, all their friends and people around like this, oh, hard luck. Because if somebody, and I know this from being at the roadside, so if somebody is done for 36 in a 30 or whatever it is, oh, hard luck, that's rotten luck kind of.
That's because they're never done for 36. They are always done for 32, aren't they? Yes. When they retell the story down the pub.
Yes, but there's that sense that you haven't really done anything wrong, that you're the unlucky one. So that's what I'd really like to I'd like to sort of focus on. But other than that, I can't believe 2 hours has gone this quickly. So well done to everybody for sticking with us, and I hope it's been helpful. I'd certainly love to. We can't have all the ideas, can we, Dan, about content, and so please be in touch, email Dan or me about the sort of things that we could highlight and work on and present to you in this kind of format in the months to come, because we would really like to support you in doing that. And just a quick one, we have developments in motorcycle safety tomorrow at 11 o'clock as a Project Edward webinar. Now that includes an interview with my 16-year-old son. He turned 16 last Thursday and he's done his CBT. And it's kind of we need the co-creation of our young people. I've heard that message earlier about, making things work and not just having reforms and training and laws imposed on them. So he probably won't have a lot to say, but we'll do our best. That's it from me. Dan, I'll let you wrap up. Thank you.
Thanks, James, and thank you to all of our contributors, to our panelists, to our presenters. You've heard about the new partnership plan in Wales, the new coordination centre in national roads policing. We've looked at what's going on in work-related road safety and what's going on rural roads and speed. Hopefully that's encouraged you that there's much more to get on with as we all look to move forward in moving from that national ambition to local delivery of the road safety strategy. And we'll hopefully be bringing you some more content later in the year. But thanks for spending time with us, and thanks to everyone who's taken part.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.